Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Maintenance Mode, the series where I take a look at broken things in video games and try to fix them as best I can. This part is a continuation of last week's episode where we took a look at some of the Dark Magician cards from Konami's incredibly popular game, Yu-Gi-Oh! Specifically, we're looking at Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel Dark Magician. So cards like Dragoon are banned, and we do not have access to, I believe, Palladium Oracle Mana or Dark Magician of Chaos Max, I believe is the name of those cards. We don't have those yet. Dragoon is banned, and those other two just aren't in the game right now. Hopefully one day we get those cards added to the game, but as a result of Dragoon being banned, and honestly Dragoon being very, very good, he won't be covered, and neither will the Oracle Monster or Chaos Max, because they're not in Master Duel, so there's nothing to fix. Also, I want to just kind of touch on some things that maybe weren't as clear in the first video. I'm not seeking to break this archetype, right? Like, I am trying to improve it so that, you know, the deck is better and fix it, but I'm not seeking to make a deck that is, you know, tier 0 or a complete, like, dominating, broken, competitive monster. The goal is to just look at the old cards that have been released by Konami, because you have to think that this deck's been around since, like, 2006 or older. Actually, I'm almost certain it's older. I just don't feel like looking up when Dark Magician first released. You know what I mean, right? Like, the deck's been around for a very long time, alongside Blue Eyes and Red Eyes and stuff like that, right? So, the card design has, like, the philosophy behind Konami's card design has shifted drastically in, you know, the 30 plus years that Yu-Gi-Oh! Has existed. Has it been 30 years? No, it's like 25, right? What the hell am I talking about? Never mind. The point is, we're not making the deck broken. We are looking at these cards, seeing what's wrong with them, like what kind of outdated design they have, and then we're attempting to fix those outdated design elements while still kind of keeping the original spirit and theme of the card. So, like with Dark Magician Girl, right, in the last video, could have, you know, made her into a ritual monster or something like that, or turned her into a Link 1 that special summons Dark Magician from deck when it hits the field, right? But that's changing the very fundamentals of the card without keeping the original theme of the card, which is, you know, Dark Magician Girl grows stronger when Dark Magician is on the field or in the graveyard. So the idea is give her a special summon effect to make her more competitively viable, because when she's in your hand, she's really bad and doesn't do anything. So let her special summon from the hand and apply the attack increase to both her and Dark Magician, right? Because she's supposed to be helping him and he's helping her. That's kind of keeping the theme of the card while also making it a better card. So yeah, given the fact that that's the, like, idea of this series is just update cards so that they have better effects and that they're not useless anymore, there are some cards that do not require an update, right? So a big example here, we'll get to, actually I think I covered it in the last video, that Magician Souls is a card that's, like, perfectly fine. It does not need an update. It's a good card. In fact, it's like the Band-Aid card that keeps our deck running right now. Outside of Dragoon, if you're playing TCG OCG. But yeah, like in Master Duel, Magician Souls is like our best card. Our second best card is without a doubt Soul Servant, which is a card that's not getting updated or getting a custom card splashed on the screen right now because its effect is just already good. I'm going to read it for you, sorry. Place one card on top of the deck from your hand, deck, or graveyard that is Dark Magician or mentions Dark Magician or Dark Magician Girl, except Soul Servant. During your main phase, you can banish this card from your graveyard. Draw cards equal to the number of Palladium monsters, Dark Magician, or Dark Magician Girl with different names on the field and in the graveyards. You can only use the effect of Soul Servant once per turn. So, you know what I mean? Like, this draws you 2 cards. It's, well, actually the skill ceiling for this is like it can draw you 3+ cards depending on the support for Dark Magician that's available, right? If we ever get more Palladium monsters, you know, this card's value goes through the roof, right? It continues to increase depending on, you know, Konami deciding to give us support, which, fair enough, right? We got Mirage Knight support that's not Dark Magician related, and we got a Monster Reborn card that has Dark Magician on the front cover of the card. He's literally like the centerpiece of the artwork, and it is not a Dark Magician card. So God help us if we ever do get more support. So yeah, we're not trying to break the cards or anything like that. Also, another card that is like fine. This people might disagree with me here. Is Magician's Combination. This card doesn't really need to be touched, right? I don't need to retrain this because it's a continuous trap card. Once per turn, when a card or effect is activated, except during the damage step, you can tribute 1 Dark Magician or Dark Magician Girl. Special summon 1 Dark Magician or Dark Magician Girl from your hand or graveyard with a different name than the tributed monster, and if you do, negate the activated effect. If this face-up card is sent from the spell and trap zone to the graveyard, you can destroy 1 card on the field, right? So I don't think this really needs to be changed too much. The only thing I'd maybe change is you can special summon from the banished zone, just so that, you know, we kind of future-proof the card a little bit. But like, other than that, it's fine. The main reason you don't see this card ran too often is just because Dark Magician Girl's kind of bad. And like, ideally you don't want to play her, but if we had more cards that got our bricks in the graveyard in a more reliable way, this card would be better. So I think this is like this is a support issue, right? Like, this card is a sleeper good card. It's not the right format or scenario for this card. You also have to think, like, Bestials are running around. DD Crow is still a thing, right? Tearlaments was a thing for a while. The Ishizu cards were a thing for a while. The Runic cards are a thing, right? Like, there's so many cards that can, like, banish cards from your graveyard or just banish cards in general, that this reviving from the graveyard in not banish zone kind of hinders it, right? We just haven't really been in a good format where this card can shine because our graveyard is pretty much never safe. So more often than not, Dark Magician Girl or Dark Magician are going to get, like, banished or something like that, and then this card's kind of like dead. It's not really live unless your opponent decides to blow it up, in which case it gets to pop a card on the field, which is pretty cool. So it's a fine card. I'm not gonna dwell on that any longer. Let's actually get to the meat and potatoes of the actual video, which is me remaking some Dark Magician cards. One final thing, I swear, super quick. These cards are being remade in kind of a vacuum, right? So we have like 15 cards here, right, that I've remade, which, by the way, this is probably going to be about the same length, if not longer, than the previous video, which was like an hour long. I apologize, but it's Dark Magician. I love Dark Magician, and I ramble sometimes, so stick with me here, please. But yeah, we're looking at them in a vacuum, so don't look at the effect that I'm going to change for Twin Burst and like look at it at the same time as I don't know, Dark Renewal, or no, that's not the right one. You know what I mean? Like, we're not taking the retrained circle and the remastered Eye of Timaeus card and applying them both at the same time, right? We're looking at this under the lens that only one of these cards got remade. How would I make this card better? Or assume that the rest of the deck is still the same. How do I fix this particular card, right? So that's kind of the mentality I had when fixing this deck. With one exception, and we'll get to that one exception like halfway through the video. Anyway, let's start with like the biggest attraction. The card that I think is like the easiest to fix, but I gave it some more shit anyway. Eye of Timaeus. Normal spell card. This card is always treated as Legendary Dragon Timaeus. Target one Dark Magician monster you control. Fusion summon one fusion monster from your extra deck that mentions that monster on the field as material, using it as the fusion material. You can only activate one Eye of Timaeus per turn. So, the reason this card doesn't really see... Like, it sees play. You can play Timaeus. It's not a useless card. But the biggest problem with this card is that it's not searchable. And unless you're, like, deep into competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! Or, like, understand the weird interactions of this game, you might not even understand why this card isn't searchable. Like, if you're playing this at your locals or playing this with friends, you probably search Eye of Timaeus because you're like, it has Dark Magician in its card text. That means I can search it. No, it doesn't. It says Dark Magician monster. And because of that weird fucking ruling, for whatever reason, they've come to the conclusion that this card cannot be searched by any, by like Rod or anything like that, right? You can technically search it with Triple Tactics Thrust. So, you know, take with that what you will. But generally, you cannot search it within the archetype. So, the quickest way to fix this card would simply be to just let it be searchable, right? Like, I think we can all agree that if you do that, the card instantly becomes a 1 or 2 staple in the entire deck. However, I took things a step further because I'm crazy and I feel like our deck needs something like this, and I think it's just a cool effect. So, hear me out. The Eye of Timaeus, this is the remastered version of the card, my custom card. First off, it's a quick spell, right? It's a quick effect now. Target one Dark Magician or Dark Magician girl you control. Fusion summon one fusion monster from your extra deck that mentions the targeted monster as fusion material. The monster fusion summoned with this effect has its name treated as the targeted monster's name while on the field and in the graveyard. You cannot summon monsters the turn you activate this card except Dark Spellcaster monsters and monsters that list Dark Magician or Dark Magician Girl in their card text. So why have I added the things that I've added? Well, considering how strong Dragoon is, right? Imagine if Eye of Timaeus was searchable, right? Like to be fair, you would get like one negate. What is it? One negate or one pop? You get one pop with Dragoon, by using Timaeus and Dark Magician because you're technically only using one normal monster. But what this would do is people could just run Dark Magician. They could run Dark Magician, Magician Souls, Pre-Preparation of Rites, Illusion of Chaos, and Rod as an engine with a single copy of Eye of Timaeus. And then you just build towards making Dragoon, and then you can run whatever other engine, you kind of want. Or just like whatever, right? Like whatever, for whatever reason, we want to put some restrictions on this card because the effect is actually kind of strong. The fact that it's a quick effect is one thing. The fact that like the biggest thing here is changing the monster's name so that it's treated as Dark Magician or Dark Magician Girl while on the field and in the graveyard. The reason I did that is because one of the reasons Dragon Knight, the fusion monster, is so good is because it's treated as Dark Magician while on the field and in the graveyard. And there's really no reason why it should do that other than the fact that Dark Magician is fusing with Timaeus. So like lore wise, right? Theme wise, this still works, right? Also, let's not forget that like most of the Dark Magician fusions are just Dark Magician writing something, right? Like the Magical Knight card that came out, Magical Dragon Knight or some shit like that. It's literally just Dark Magician writing what, Curse of Dragon or something like that. Cavalry is just Dark Magician riding a horse, right? Dark Paladin is Dark Magician holding a fucking big ass sword, like, or it's, actually I think it's like a pike or something like that. But you get the point, right? It's just Dark Magician in a new outfit, either riding a new monster or like doing something else in the artwork. But it is very clearly still Dark Magician, and for some reason our cards don't identify it as Dark Magician when they're fusion summoned. I also think that would be kind of like a really unique way to play the deck, because now basically all of our fusion monsters become boss monsters once Eternal Soul's on the field, because all of them become immune to card effects, right? While Eternal Soul is on the field. And I just think that that's a really fun and interesting way to make a lot of our lesser, like weaker fusion monsters more viable. Also, for whatever reason, the Dark Magicians is not treated as Dark Magician or Dark Magician Girl on the field. Well, I'll get to that, and I'll get to the rest of the fusion monsters in the next part. We're not covering the fusion monsters this time around, or most of the extra deck. We're covering just the remaining spell and trap cards. So, yeah. I think this fixes Timaeus. I have Timaeus, not regular Timaeus. We'll get to regular Timaeus in the next part, too. But let me know what you guys think. Is this too strong? I think it is probably too strong, but I also think it'd be really fun. And also, Red Eyes has a card that kind of does this with Red Eyes Fusion. It turns the Red Eyes fusion monster that you summon into Red Eyes Black Dragon. And I feel like that's like the perfect effect for Dark Magician. Anyway, moving on. That's Eye of Timaeus. Next up, Destined Rivals. I think this is an appropriate follow-up to Eye of Timaeus. A card that's focused on the extra deck, followed by a card that will not be focused on extra deck monsters. Anyway, the vanilla version of Destined Rivals effect is as follows. First off, it's a normal trap card, and it says, if you control Blue Eyes White Dragon or Dark Magician, negate the effect of all face-up monsters your opponent currently controls until the end phase. You can only activate one Destined Rivals per turn. Honestly, the effect of this card is not bad. The main issue with this card is it only negates the effects of current monsters on the field. So this thing is basically a worse infinite impermanence, because it requires you to control a normal monster, and it doesn't like lock out the zones, right? To be fair, it can potentially hit multiple monsters, right? But like, let's be real, if your opponent has two monsters on the field, they're probably going to make a link play, or they're going to synchro summon or XZs or something like that, right? They're going into the extra deck. They're probably not going to activate those monster effects once two of them are on the field. And even if they do, they can just link them away and activate another effect. So it doesn't matter, right? So that's the main issues with this card. When fixing it, the custom card version that I came up with is, first off, it's a counter trap. So your opponent will not be able to respond to this card unless they respond with another counter trap. And the effect is as follows. When your opponent activates the effect of a monster special summoned from the extra deck, and you control Dark Magician or Blue Eyes White Dragon, and no extra deck monsters, negate that monster's effect, then negate the effects of all all monsters your opponent controls until the end phase. If you control a normal monster, you can activate this card from your hand. So the idea here is okay. First off, it's a Blue Eyes card too, right? So I kind of had to consider that in redesigning the card, because whatever changes I make here have to also be, something that I can't just turn this into a pure Dark Magician card, because again, that goes against the spirit of the original card. So the idea is DM and Blue Eyes are vanilla monster focused decks, right? Like our boss monsters are technically Dark Magician and Blue Eyes White Dragon. So the idea is to kind of reward the player for playing the vanilla monsters and kind of playing the deck the original way that it was intended to be played, right? So, and kind of take you back to old school Duelist Kingdom Yu-Gi-Oh! Or old school, like, Battle City Yu-Gi-Oh! Where it's just you and your vanilla monsters for the most part, right? Or, like, you and the monsters from your main deck. Very few extra deck monsters show up. And that's kind of the idea, right? Also, the idea is to give both decks an answer to going second. Because if you have Destined Rivals in your hand and you can manage to get Dark Magician or Blue Eyes on the field, Destined Rivals basically becomes a Dark Ruler no more, right? Doesn't matter what your opponent's board is, you can actually play the game because it negates all monster effects your opponent controls until the end of the turn. So that was kind of my thoughts with Destined Rivals. I think just making the card like a counter trap and making it affect all monsters your opponent controls to the end phase is totally reasonable. If they did that, the card would instantly be better. But the fact that, you know, it only negates like the monster effects that are currently on the field is just kind of not useful. I mean, it's slow. That's the problem, right? Like if you went first, then your opponent goes, and this card is still on the field, like because you set it on your first turn, and then next turn you summon Dark Magician, and then activate this card, it's better. But because it's not a counter trap, your opponent can just negate this effect, right? With an Omni Negate, if they built an Omni Negate board, or they have like Baron on the field, which is pretty common. So yeah, that's Destined Rivals. Let's move on. Alright, next up is Sage's Stone, a normal spell card with the following effect. If you control a face-up Dark Magician Girl, special summon one Dark Magician from your hand or deck. I love these really simple Dark Magician effects. Like, they're not complicated or anything like that. It's just, if you control Dark Magician or Dark Magician Girl, do this thing. I kind of miss this very basic style of the game. But anyway, why is this card kind of mediocre? Well, first off, we don't really have good ways of summoning Dark Magician Girl, right? The best way you can do it is with Magician Souls, and that's pretty much it. Like, that's one of the only viable ways to do it, or Fusion Deployment, but Fusion Deployment is not a Dark Magician card, right? It's just generic fusion support. So when fixing this card, I made the following changes. Still a normal spell, we didn't make it a quick play. And the effect is as follows. Special summon one Magician Girl monster from your hand, deck, or graveyard. You can banish this card from your graveyard. Special summon one Dark Magician from your hand or deck. You can only use one effect of Sage's Stone per turn, and only once that turn. So the idea is to give the card something to do if you don't control anything, right? Which tends to be a big problem with the Dark Magician archetype, is we have a lot of cards that require other cards to activate their effect, right? Like they require Dark Magician on the field. And I know I just said that I love cards that are just simple and require you to just have Dark Magician or something on the field. But I mean that in terms of like nostalgia. I love how simple these cards used to be. But in reality, if you want to compete, these cards have to have like effects that can be activated without any other requirements, right? If you go turn one, you need to be able to activate this card in your hand. Otherwise, it's a dead card, and every dead card in your hand is more fuel for your opponent to kill you, because every meta deck can pretty much shit out enough damage to OTK you. So, you know, you don't really get the opportunity to go to turn 3, so your cards need to do something turn 1, right? So this special summons a Magician Girl. So it's either Dark Magician Girl or any of the other Magician Girl cards, because I believe those are technically still considered Dark Magician cards, even if they are not, even if they don't list Dark Magician in their card text. Thematically, they're still kind of Dark Magician monsters. So kind of giving them a little bit of support, right? Even if you don't want to play Dark Magician, this card can still be used as a support card for the Magician Girl archetype. And then just like give it a banish effect while it's in the graveyard, right? Special summon a Dark Magician from hand or deck. I think that's pretty reasonable. Moving on. Miracle Restoring. For the longest time, I thought this card said Miracle Restoration. I don't understand the name of this card, really. Anyway, it's a normal trap card with the following effect. Remove 2 spell counters from your field, then target 1 Dark Magician or Buster Blader in your graveyard. Special summon that target. So, I think this card has the right kind of idea. It's a special summon focus card. The main problem is that it's a trap. Like, one of the big problems is that it's a trap card. The biggest problem is that it requires spell counters. And our archetype, I believe, only has 1 card that relies on spell counters, and that's Skilled Dark Magician. So I don't even know why this is, like, why is this part of the effect, right? And same thing with Buster Blader, right? Buster Blader, I don't think has any cards that require spell counters. I guess this was made for Skilled Dark Magician and Skilled White Magician or Skilled Blue Magician, something like that. And like that's fine, but like Dark Magician and Buster Blader don't really have any synergy, like, at all anyway. So this card also being a Buster Blader card is just kind of strange. Let's move on. How do you fix it, right? So retrain, Miracle Restoring. Honestly, I'd change this to just Miracle Restoration. I think that sounds better. The effect's still a normal trap card. You could debatably make this into a normal spell card, and I think it would also be fine. Banish 2 spells from your graveyard, then special summon 1 Dark Magician or Buster Blader from your deck, graveyard, or banish zone. Pretty simple stuff, right? Instead of using spell counters, you just banish 2 spell cards. Still a little slow, right? Because first off, it's a trap card. Second off, you need to have some graveyard set up. But if you're playing Dark Magician, and generally if you're playing Buster Blader, they have some pretty good spell cards. Dark Magician has good spell cards. Dark Magician can cycle through a lot of spell cards very quickly too. Thanks to playing cards like Upstart Goblin, Terraforming when it's legal, Magician Souls being able to send spell cards from your hand to the graveyard for draws, right? We have options. So I think this is a much better effect for what this card is kind of going for. And I don't think, having some Dark Magician and Buster Blader synergy is bad, given the fact that Dark Paladin exists, right? And I think this just kind of helps you get to that Buster Blader faster, which helps you get to Dark Paladin. So, yeah. Next up, Magician Salvation. This card is like teetering on the edge of just like, it's okay enough, so we run it, but it's still bad in comparison to like, so I'll get to it after we read the card effect, right? Magician Salvation, a field spell. When this card is activated, you can set 1 Eternal Soul directly from your deck. If you normal or special Dark Magician or Dark Magician Girl, except during the damage step, you can target one of those monsters, special summon 1 Dark Magician or Dark Magician Girl from your graveyard with a different name than that monster. You can only use the effect of Magician Salvation once per turn, and you can only activate 1 Magician Salvation per turn. Okay. So, the reason the card is kind of mediocre, first off, it sets Eternal Soul from your deck, but you cannot activate it. It should... I'm going to get to that. I'm going to get to what it should say. But that's a bad effect because it's too slow. The revival effect is actually fine, right? Like, swapping Dark Magician and Dark Magician Girl is generally pretty okay. Again, it would be much better if you could swap from the grave or the Banish Zone too. I don't understand why it needs to be the graveyard. In fact, it should also say hand, right? It should say hand, graveyard, or Banish Zone. But like other than that, it's okay. It's passable, right? The main issue here is that when you're comparing Salvation to other field spells that are released by Konami that are like modern field spells, this card is like, it's laughable how little it does, right? Look at the Tearlaments field spell, right? I don't even remember like what that's, something planet, right? Primeval Planet or something like that. That card like searches a Tearlaments monster, it fucking pops a card on the field, it grants them like extra attack points. Same thing with the Kashtira spell card, right? It searches a Kashtira monster, it pops a card on the field, and it increases the card's attack points, right? Like it basically does all three good effects that you want from any individual card. It's just on a field spell, right? So that's generally the power level you want field spells to be at, is when this thing's on the field, your main priority needs to be blow up that field spell, because the field spell is going to just generate so much advantage over time, right? Okay, so how do we fix Salvation? When this card is activated, activate one spell or trap card from your hand or deck that mentions Dark Magician or Dark Magician Girl in its card text. Once per turn, quick effect, special summon one Dark Magician or Dark Magician Girl from your hand, graveyard, or Banish Zone. If this card is destroyed by an opponent's card effect, set one spell or trap card from the deck that mentions Dark Magician or Dark Magician Girl in its card text to your side of the field. So it's still pretty, I would say this is still like on the weaker side of field spells, but you know, it keeps the theme of the original effect, and it kind of gets to the point of the original effect much faster. You can just activate the card, and it's any spell or trap card that lists Dark Magician, right, and Dark Magician Girl. So activate Circle from deck, activate Eternal Soul from deck, activate Magician's Combination from deck, right? Like anything really. And I think that makes the card much better, because it essentially allows you to do Eternal Soul plays instantly, right? You can set up your field turn one, and you don't have to worry about, you know, your opponent negating the activation of any card effects or anything like that. Doesn't fix the fact that Eternal Soul still loses the Duster, but whatever. And then of course just a simple special summon effect every turn, right? So even if you don't have Eternal Soul on the field, this thing will let you special summon Dark Magician or Dark Magician Girl once per turn, and it retrieves them from the Banish Zone. So assuming Eternal Soul can't get them, Salvation can. And then it floats into a spell or trap card, right? So if your opponent dusters your field, you know, you can at least set up an extra Eternal Soul or something for next turn. Maybe it should say the card can be activated this turn. I'll leave you guys to make that decision, but I think this is fine. I think this is something that Konami would actually print if they loved Dark Magician and cared about us at all, but I don't think they do. So let's move on to the next card. Alright, next up is Magician Navigation. I love Navi. I love its artwork. I come from like Duel Links. I've played a lot of Duel Links, especially all throughout like high school and college. So this card kind of has a special place in my heart because it's broken in Duel Links. Hence why I think it's actually like a good card. It's just, it has some like fundamental flaws. It's better in Duel Links, right? Because the deck size is smaller. Starting with a Dark Magician in your hand is not like as bad in that game. Anyway, the effect. It's a normal trap card. You can special summon one Dark Magician from your hand. Then special summon one level 7 or lower Dark Spellcaster monster from your deck. If you control Dark Magician, except the turn this card was sent to the graveyard, you can banish this card from your graveyard. Then target one face-up spell or trap card your opponent controls, negate its effect until the end phase of this turn. Pretty good, actually, right? Like, I actually think this card is one of our better cards. Like I said, it's really strong in Duel Links. In fact, it's limited. Yeah, Dark Magician actually has a limited card alongside Rod, so that should tell you how that limited list works. But like again, it's a completely different game in Duel Links. Yeah, let's get into the custom card, and I'll explain why navigation is still kind of too slow for the deck or too inconsistent for the deck. So the custom card version, the improved version, says special summon 1 Dark Magician from your hand, graveyard, or banish zone. Then special summon 1 level 8 or lower spellcaster from your hand or deck that mentions Dark Magician in its card text. If you control Dark Magician, you can banish this card from your graveyard, target 1 card on the field, negate its effect until the end of the turn. So, first off, like the main problem with standard version of navigation is simply that you have to have Dark Magician in your hand. And the deck has kind of evolved and changed to the point where Dark Magician in hand is kind of a bad state to be in. Like, it can be fine if you have Eternal Soul on the field, or you have Secrets of Dark Magic in your hand or on the field, right? Like, then Dark Magician in hand is not bad. But generally speaking, because the entire deck revolves around Magician Souls, which sends Dark Magician to the graveyard, all of our effects need to kind of revolve around the graveyard as well, because Magician Souls is our best card, right? So if we ever got support that does something, like does a lot, and it involves Dark Magician in the hand, then, you know, maybe this card would see more play in its current state. Because I think, other than needing Dark Magician in the hand, this card is actually really good, right? You go, you summon Dark Magician, you summon another spellcaster, and you get a negate next turn, right? I also think that the main issue with this card is that it's a trap card. If this was a normal spell card, this card would actually be really good, because then you can set up your rank 7 plays, right? That might actually be the only problem with this card. It's just that it's a normal trap card. If it was a normal spell, it would be fine, or a quick play spell, it would be fine. But I didn't change it that way. Instead, just making it so that the card can special summon DM from hand, graveyard, or banish zone, I think is a much more consistent method for specialing DM. Also, putting the restrictions on the card so that you can only special summon monsters that mention Dark Magician in their card text, I think future-proofs the card a little bit, and keeps the card from being used for degenerate strategies, like floating into Jowgen the Spiritualist or something like that, which I don't think you could in the original card either, but you get my point. Like, you never know what Konami decides to print, and, you know, we want to keep our cards from getting banned. Also, we want to keep our cards in archetype, right? Like, I like to play pure decks. I don't really like kitchen sink decks or soup decks, so I would prefer that we keep things in the archetype. Also, you might be wondering, why is the effect level 8 monsters or level 8 spellcasters? It's because we have, Dark Magician of Chaos, and we have no way of summoning that thing other than its own special summoning card or summoning it naturally, right? So navigation actually allows you to summon Magician of Chaos, or Dark Magician of Chaos, right? Anyway, so yeah, that's Navi. I like Navi. Also, just target a card on the field and negate it, I think, is also pretty good. I was going to include an effect that's like, if you control Dark Magician Girl and Dark Magician, destroy the card, like negate and destroy. But generally, I thought that was too much card text, and also, I don't know, I thought that might be a little too much, right? So let me know if you think that's too much, or if that probably should be added to the card down below. Moving on. Oh boy. Okay. Magic formula. I don't think I have to really go into too much detail on why this card is bad. It's an equip spell. That should be like your biggest indicator for why this card sucks. The effect is pretty simple. Equip only to Dark Magician or Dark Magician Girl. It gains 700 attack points. If this card is sent from the field to the graveyard, gain 1,000 life points. It is the biggest fucking nothing burger I think I've ever seen on a Dark Magician card. First off, the problem here is that you can only equip it to Dark Magician or Dark Magician Girl. Um, like the 700 attack boost is nice, but like that's all it does. And again, it does nothing in its hand, right? Like it's dead in the hand. Imagine if this could equip to any Dark Magician monster or any monster that lists Dark Magician in its card text, right? You could equip it to Rod to actually make Rod like a pretty decent beat stick. That's kind of it. You could equip it to Apprentice Magician, right? Which would be kind of cool. I mean, you could equip it to Magician's Souls, but like 700 attack isn't helping that monster, right? But just like actually letting the card do something instead of just being in your hand and not doing anything would be so much nicer. Also, gaining 1,000 life points is like totally irrelevant, right? Like that's like okay, whatever. If the card said something like if this card is sent from the field to the graveyard, you gain life points equal to, you know, the monster's attack points that was equipped with this card. So like gain 2,500 with Dark Magician or gain 2,000 with Dark Magician Girl, something like that. Even then, that's still not enough for an equip spell. It's still bad. So how do you fix it? Still an equip spell. I'm not gonna change it and make it a non-equip spell. The new effect is equip only to a Dark Spellcaster monster that mentions Dark Magician or Dark Magician Girl in its card text. The equipped monster gains 700 attack and defense. If a card on your side of the field would be destroyed by an opponent's card effect, you can send this card to the graveyard instead. There you go. With just that, the card is fixed and debatably viable, right? It protects your back row from Duster. You can equip it straight to Rod if you need to. You can also equip it to Dark Magician or Dark Magician Girl. It affects their attack and defense points, right? Generally just an all-around better equip spell. It would still probably not see play because it's an equip spell. And unless I made the effect absolutely cracked and does like 6 other things, I don't know. But I think giving it some protection, right? Like just giving it a protection effect is probably fine. It is generally like the power level of what I would expect from Dark Magician. Moving on. Oh, I was really looking forward to this one. Dedication Through Light and Darkness. First off, I love the artwork for this card. And second, I love the name of this card. I'm going to say it one more time just in case you missed it. Dedication Through Light and Darkness. I don't even know what the fuck that means. Actually, I kind of have an idea what that means. But it's just a cool name for a card, right? And it matches. Like, the artwork is also cool. It's just a cool card. It's too bad. It's fucking dog shit. Okay. It's not that bad. It's just underwhelming giving the card you're going to summon with it. The effect is this. It's a quick effect spell. Tribute 1 Dark Magician. Special summon 1 Dark Magician of Chaos from your hand, deck, or graveyard. I will give Konami this. They actually basically said special from anywhere, right? Which is beautiful. You love to see that. Banish Zone wasn't really utilized all that much in this era of the game that this card was released. So I'll forgive them for not including special from Banish Zone. But, oh boy. That's rough. How do you fix... But again, I don't even know if necessarily this card itself is what's bad. But I'm still going to make it better anyway. So, how do you fix it? First off, I got rid of the fact that it's a quick play spell. Because it doesn't... I mean, you could use it to tag out. Like, tag DM out if you really wanted to. But I don't think that's necessary. Like, you want... Because once... Dark Magician of Chaos hits the field, it's like, okay, now what, right? Like, he doesn't really do anything when he hits the field. So the new effect is our standard spell card. Banish one Dark Magician from your hand, deck, or graveyard. Special summon one Dark Magician of Chaos from your hand, deck, or graveyard. Its name becomes Dark Magician while on the field and in the graveyard. So basically what you're doing is transforming Dark Magician into Dark Magician of Chaos, which is what the original effect is implying, right? But it's not just, swapping the two out. It's actually replacing Dark Magician of Chaos's name with Dark Magician, right? So it benefits from Eternal Soul. It benefits from Soul Servant, right? It like the whole 9 yards, basically. Instantly, and this is like a big reason of why I got rid of the quick play effect, right? So that it's kind of balanced, right? Like it's a way of making the card strong, but not too strong, right? Because of everything, like quick play is instantly better, right? If any card that's a quick play is basically a pretty good card. I say when we're talking about Dedication Through Light and Darkness, which is a quick play spell that's not very good. But you get the idea, right? I don't know. I think these are enough changes to instantly make Dark Magician of Chaos like decently playable, right? Especially since you can summon from deck, right? So like, what do you care if you draw into this and don't have Dark Magician in your hand? You can just special from deck, right? It's fantastic. Okay. Let's look at the actual monster. I know I said that this was like focused on the spell and trap cards, but I thought it would be really dumb to, cover Dedication Through Light and Darkness and not talk about Dark Magician of Chaos. So let's look at the actual original version of Dark Magician of Chaos, and then I'll tell you how I fixed him. First off, he's a level 8 spellcaster. I'm already not a fan of that because our deck revolves around level 7s. And we want to make level 7 XZs and stuff like that. So that's already kind of, I don't know. But has 2,800 attack points, 2,600 defense points. Actually pretty decent stat line for a level 8 monster. And it's a spellcaster, dark spellcaster. So its effect is, during the end phase, if this card was normal or special summon this turn, you can target one spell card in your graveyard. Add it to your hand. You can only use this effect of Dark Magician of Chaos once per turn. If this card destroys an opponent's monster, by battle, after damage calculation, banish that opponent's monster. If this face-up card leaves the field, banish it instead. Why do you hate yourself, Dark Magician of Chaos? Why are you like, I died, I'm going to go away and fuck off and banish myself? Like, what is that? Why are you doing that? Stop doing that. Go to the graveyard like a normal person. Anyway, how I changed the card. First off, it's still a level 8. I know I mentioned before that I didn't care for that, but changing its level meant that I would have to change its stat line, right? Like, I wouldn't feel comfortable having a 2,800 attack, 2,600 defense monster that's level 7, right? Because it feels like you're better than Dark Magician in literally every way possible in terms of being an effect monster and having better stats. So it feels more appropriate to make him level 8 with those stat lines and with the effect that we're going to give him, right? So the new effect is, this card is also treated as a light monster while on the field and in the graveyard. The reason for that is because it has chaos in its name, and that's a big theme for chaos monsters, is they have stuff to do with light and dark monsters. So having this card be treated as a light monster is also like, seems like it's a pretty cool quirk for this kind of card. Next up, during your in phase, target one spell card in your graveyard, add it to your hand, or set it to your side of the field. Monsters destroyed by this card are banished. If this card is banished, special summon one Dark Magician that is banished. Again, I think like these effects are boom, 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 pretty simple. Instead of just getting a spell card once, right? Once during the turn that this card was summoned, it's every time it's your in phase, you get a spell card from your graveyard. Maybe that's too strong, but maybe that's incentive for your opponent to actually out this card, right? Deal with this card, otherwise it's going to keep generating advantage. The monsters destroyed or banished are a pretty simple carryover from the original effect. I think it's actually a really cool effect. If you wanted to make this card even better, you would change that to be monsters that battle this card are banished. I think that's maybe a little too strong given the fact that it generates you advantage in two ways by grabbing a spell card from your graveyard and special summoning Dark Magician from the Banished Zone. So basically the idea is if you traded this card with dedication, like if you summon this card with dedication through Light and Darkness and this card dies, you get that Dark Magician back, right? He kind of like downgrades back to his original form. And I think that's cool, right? I think that's cool theming. I think it's a cool card effect. And I'd love to see like a retrain of this card with effects similar to this, right? Because the artwork for this card is fucking phenomenal, right? Like I love the design of Dark Magician of Chaos. It's just that we never have the opportunity to fucking play him because he just like doesn't do anything. He doesn't really do anything. And that's kind of it. It's just he doesn't really do anything. So, yeah. Moving on. Okay, so continuing kind of the theme of covering the monsters that are special summoned with a spell card, we have Knight's Title. Normal spell, tribute one face-up Dark Magician, special summon one Dark Magician Knight from your hand, deck, or graveyard. When I was going through the Dark Magician cards on Master Duel and figuring out what cards I'm going to change, right? Just like looking at what I had to deal with for this video, I came across this card and like I literally went through an entire like character arc of talking to myself about how fucking bad this card is and the monster that it summons. This card is the perfect example of what is fucking wrong with this archetype and what's wrong with the cards in like the support cards in this archetype. Because this card does nothing on its own, like most of our other cards, and the effect it has when you actually get to pop the effect off is fucking dog shit. It's mediocre because it summons a really shitty monster anyway. In fact, I'm not even going to show you the custom card yet. I'm going to show you Dark Magician Knight first, so that you really get a chance. Like, I'm gonna let you sit in this shit like I did. I really want you to grasp how bad these two cards are, and then we can talk about fixing them. So, Dark Magician Knight, a level 7 warrior with 2,500 attack points and 2,100 defense points, cannot be normal summoned or set, must be special summoned with Knight's Title, and cannot be special summoned by other ways. When this card is special summoned, target one card on the field and destroy that target. Get the fuck out of here, Dark Magician Knight, and never come back. You are drunk, go home, go to sleep, and stay asleep for all eternity. I fucking hate this card's effect, even though I love the artwork. The artwork is sick. Alright, so let me break this down for you, layer by layer, piece by piece, on why the card is fucking bad. Simply put, it can't be special summoned. It can't be normal summoned. That means if you open this card, if this card is in your hand, in your opening hand, you're crying, bro. This is worse than having vanilla DM in your hand. Because it can't be normal summoned or set, and it can't be special summoned. It can only be summoned by Knight's Title, which requires you to tribute a Dark Magician. If this card lets you special summon it and lets you normal summon it on its own, and just you could special summon it with Knight's Title, it would be slightly better, right? It would be an acceptable card. But it doesn't do that. You need Knight's Title in order to summon it. And Knight's Title requires you to tribute a Dark Magician that's already on the field. There's too much investment that goes into this card. How would you legitimately activate this card in a real match? Let me explain it. You would use Magician's Souls to summon Dark Magician. Then, if you didn't already have Knight's Title in your hand, you would normal Rod, search Magician's Title, play Magician's Title, tribute the Dark Magician that was summoned thanks to Magician Souls to finally get Dark Magician Knight. And you did all of that for a card that cannot be revived with, you know, dark or called by the grave or Eternal Soul or anything, right? You can't bring this card back. It hits the field. It pops a card on the field, which is nice. But if you do this turn 1, it literally does nothing, right? So it's just a warrior type for the deck that can't be normal or special summon. All right, I'm gonna lower my blood pressure a little bit by looking at the custom card version that we made. Let's start with Knight's Title. Still a normal spell card. Its effect is send one Dark Magician from your hand or field to the graveyard. Special summon one level 7 warrior monster from your hand, deck, or graveyard. That is pretty generic, and you might be thinking it's too generic, right? Like, you can probably abuse this in some way, but I mean, I don't know. Considering it's level 7, right? How many good level 7 warriors are there? I might be talking out of the side of my ass. There might be a lot, but hence why you still need to have Dark Magician on your hand, or in your hand, or on the field. It's not sending it from deck, right? It's not tributing from deck. And that's also why we went with send, right? Because if it just said tributed, like tribute a Dark Magician, this would still be kind of hard to work with. The reason why I made it generic level 7 monster, like level 7 warrior monster, is so that you can use it with Buster Blader, right? And those two cards, Dark Magician and Buster Blader, do have some synergy with their fusion monster and stuff like that. So I think that's fine. How did we fix Dark Magician Knight? Now, this is one of the only few times that I'm talking about, like, the remaster of the card alongside another remaster of a card. Again, just like Dark Magician of Chaos. Because these two cards are linked, I made both of them with each other in mind, right? Alright, so first off, it's still a level 7. It's still a warrior. It still has 2500 attack and 2100 defense, and it's still dark. The new effect is this card's name is treated as Dark Magician while in the hand or on the field. Actually, sorry. This card's name is treated as Dark Magician while in the hand, on the field, and in the graveyard. You can tribute one level 6 or higher spellcaster type monster. Special summon this card from your hand. When this card is special summoned, target one card on the field, destroy that target. Or destroy that card, sorry. So yeah, first off, it's treated as Dark Magician while in the hand, field, or graveyard. So it can be used with Eternal Soul. We got rid of the ridiculous, you can't summon this card. I'm not going to get back into that. But we got rid of that stupid effect and actually gave it a useful effect. First off, it has Dark Magician in its name, and yet it can't benefit from the Dark Magician cards. Same thing with Dark Magician of Chaos, right? You literally have Dark Magician in your name, and you gain no benefits from the rest of the archetype, which is very sad. There's a reason why I didn't even know, like, for the longest time, I did not know that this was even a Dark Magician card while playing Master Duel. I had completely forgotten that this card was related to Dark Magician, because in nowhere in its text does it mention Dark Magician. So when you bring up cards related to Dark Magician, the game is like, oh, this isn't a Dark Magician card. What do you mean? What do you mean it has Dark Magician in its text? That's not important. It doesn't say, none of its cards interact with the Dark Magician card, so who cares? Except Knight's Title. Anyway, tributing a level 6 or higher spellcaster monster just means that you can tribute Dark Magician or Dark Magician Girl to summon this. Or if you're feeling spicy, you can tribute, you know, any of our extra deck monsters, right? Any of our fusion monsters. I don't know why you would ever do that, but you could. Just, you always want the option to special a card from hand, right? By tributing a monster or something like that. It's always nice to have. And then finally, we keep the original destroy a card on the field effect. Considering the fact that this card is called Dark Magician while in the hand, graveyard, and on the field, this means that you can pop a card with Dark Magic Circle and you can pop a card with this card's effect when you revive it with Eternal Soul. So I think that instantly makes this card better. Really, you could keep all of the other original bullshit of that card, and just make it so that this card identifies as Dark Magician while on the field and in the graveyard, and it's instantly like still a pretty good card. Except change it so that it can actually be special summon, right? And it's a good card. All right, moving on. Fucking blood pressure. All right, Dark Magic Twin Burst. This is a fun card. All right, I like the artwork. I actually like the effect because it's just like Unga Bunga beat down Dark Magician. And sometimes you want to beat it, right? Like sometimes you like that, but it's still not very good. So let's talk about it. It's a normal spell card. That's like its biggest problem. Target one Dark Magician you control. It gains attack equal to the combined attack of all Dark Magician Girl currently on the field and in the graveyards until the end phase. You can only activate one Dark Magic Twin Burst per turn. So why Dark Magician Girls? Right? Why Dark Magician Girl? Because typically, this is how I know that like the people who make Dark Magician support over at Konami don't actually play this deck. Except the guy who made Dragoon. That guy is based, right? Like he's a fucking Chad. He's like, okay, this deck sucks. Let me fix it with one card, right? One boss monster. Anyway, yeah. The reason why I say that is because you never play more than one copy of Dark Magician Girl. You have no need to, right? She's a brick. She can't summon herself from hand or graveyard or anything like that. Like I don't know what to tell you, right? Like, why would you ever play more than one copy of Dark Magician Girl? It seems foolish. And if you have 2 copies of Dark Magician Girl in your graveyard and you activate this effect, you're probably winning the duel already, right? Like, this is just a win more card for Dark Magician. It's a flex card, for lack of a better term. So yeah, just like not very good. It's also not quick play, so you can't use it to defend yourself during your opponent's turn. It's just it's a bad attack gain effect if I've ever seen one. Let's move on to the custom card version. It's a quick effect now because it should have been a quick effect from the very start. If you control both Dark Magician and Dark Magician Girl, double the attack of those 2 monsters until the end phase. Your opponent cannot activate cards or effects during the battle phase this turn. Like, just as simple as the original effect, but infinitely better. Quick effect, you can activate it during your opponent's turn. Protects you from evenly matched, actually. Big, right? Huge effect. Protects you from evenly matched. And just doubles Dark Magician and Dark Magician Girl. Doubles their attack points if you control both cards, right? So, kind of a strict requirement. You have to control both Dark Magician and Dark Magician Girl, but I think that that's fine given the fact that you get an effect that negates card effects during the battle phase. So if you use this, you're probably pushing for game, right? You're hitting with Dark Magician, that's 5,000 attack points, and you're hitting with Dark Magician Girl, that's 4,000. That's generally pretty good. Like, you're hitting for roughly 6,000, assuming your opponent has a boss monster that has like 3,000 attack points. Yeah, nothing much to say. Not much left to say here. It's just pretty good double attack. Yeah, moving on. Not sure what else to say about that one. All right. Dark Magic Inheritance. Banish 2 spells from your graveyard. It's a quick effect, I'm sorry. Banish 2 spells from your graveyard. Add 1 spell or trap card from your deck to your hand that mentions Dark Magician or Dark Magician Girl except Dark Magic Inheritance. You can only activate 1 Dark Magic Inheritance per turn. This is a weird card because, I mean, it's basically a slightly weaker version of Rod, in the sense that, like, at least it can search spell and traps like Rod can, but requiring the banish of 2 spell cards is kind of a steep cost, just because it's harder to activate this card going first, like turn 1. You can't activate multiple copies of this card per turn, which I think is kind of a mediocre aspect of its effect. Again, this is a hard one, right? Because it's good late game, right? Like it's pretty good if you can go into a long game of of Yu-Gi-Oh. But again, going first, going turn 1, unless you build your deck specifically around using inheritance, it doesn't really do enough for me to justify like actively using it. I still think you can use it. It is not completely terrible. You just really need to build your deck with this card in mind, and then it has some function. And even then, you still might brick on it, right? Like it still might not do anything. So, moving on to its retrain or custom card variant. First off, I took off the quick effect, because why does it have a quick effect to begin with? Like I know I said quick effect cards are always good, or like just giving a card a quick effect makes it a better card, but like this legitimately doesn't do anything to give it a quick effect in its original effect, because you're using it on your turn. Why would you ever really need to use it on your opponent's turn? If the effect said that you could banish spell and trap cards or spell cards from each graveyard, then it would actually be pretty good going, with its quick effect. But anyway, it's a normal spell in the custom card version. Send 2 cards that mention Dark Magician from your deck to your graveyard. Banish this card from your graveyard. Target 1 banished Dark Magician or card that mentions Dark Magician in its card text. Add that card to your hand. You can only use the effect of 1 Dark Magic inheritance per turn, and only once that turn. So, I really like kind of the change of tempo for this card's effect. We're still sending... I mean, I guess you could make an argument that I changed the theme of this card, but I'd actually argue that I did a better job capturing the theme of this card than the original card itself. So the idea is that you would use this card to send both Dark Magician and Dark Magician Girl to the graveyard. And then you can banish this card from the graveyard to add Soul Servant, right? So that next turn, or like, you can't use both effects in the same turn, right? You can set up your graveyard turn 1, and then turn 2, you always have that follow-up, right? Of banishing this card, grab Soul Servant, and you get the draw 2 off Soul Servant. That's kind of like the design philosophy behind this card, or behind the remake of this card. But it's also like just so you can send like any to, like, let's say you're worried about your opponent having DD Crow or a Bestial, send 2 copies of Dark Magician to your graveyard. Boom, you always have a target for Eternal Soul, right? Like you can, it's live pretty much all the time. And then of course, banish this card, target 1 banish Dark Magician. Oh my god, hold on. I read this card's effect and I did not pay attention at all to the effect that I wrote for it. I thought I wrote a completely different effect for this. It actually says banish this card from your graveyard, target 1 banish Dark Magician or a card that mentions Dark Magician in its card text, add it to your hand. So you could re-grab your banished Soul Servant from the banished zone and recycle that back into your hand. Or if your Dark Magician was banished, you could cycle that back into your hand. Still, I think that that's like a fine effect. Disregard the thing that I said earlier. But I don't know. I think it works, right? Like, I think this would see more play than the current version of the card. Probably just for the graveyard setup alone. The secondary effect is just a bonus. You mostly just use this for the graveyard setup, and that's kind of it. Alright, moving on. Believe it or not, we're on the home stretch. We have 3 more cards left to do. Alright, Dark Magic Expanded. Quick effect. Sorry, it's a quick spell. Jesus Christ. It's a quick play spell. Apply these effects in sequence based on the number of Dark Magician and or Dark Magician Girl on the field and in the graveyard. It's very early in the morning when I'm recording this, so my brain has not fully woken up yet. Alright. +1. So you have one Dark Magician or one Dark Magician Girl in your graveyard. You do not have a Dark Magician and a Dark Magician Girl. You just have one or the other. One Dark Spellcaster on the field gains 1,000 attack until the end of this turn. I think it's really interesting that it doesn't say target. You just apply that effect to a Dark Spellcaster, which is kind of interesting. 2. So you have Dark Magician, 2 Dark Magicians, or you have Dark Magician and Dark Magician Girl in the graveyard, or you have 2 Dark Magician Girls in the graveyard. This turn, your opponent cannot activate cards and effects in response to your spell and trap cards or effect activation. What the fuck did I just read? This turn, your opponent cannot activate cards and effects in response to your spell and trap card or effect activation. Okay. Also, spell and trap cards you control cannot be destroyed by your opponent's card effects. So this, I used this card a lot in Duel Links, and I think it was very slept on in Duel Links, and I think it's kind of slept on now. I would put this in the higher tier, right? The higher echelon of Dark Magician cards. Not quite as good as Soul Servant and Magician Souls, but not quite as bad as Knight's Title, right? Because your biggest fear as a Dark Magician player is Duster, for the most part, right? Because Eternal Soul leaves the field and you just lose. So having a card that is not Dragon Knight that can just protect your back row is so nice. It's so comforting. Hence why I actually think that this card is like pretty decent. Also, your opponent can't respond, right? So you use Circle's effect, your opponent can't negate it, right? If you have this card in your hand and you activate Salvation, right, and you have Dark Magician and Dark Magician Girl already in the graveyard, your opponent can't respond, right? Your opponent can't negate for the rest of the turn. It's actually a great effect. It's just we don't have enough ways of getting Dark Magician Girl and Dark Magician in the graveyard or on the field, right? You need to be running like a Magician's Navigation combo in order for that second effect to be live. And then finally, the third effect is Dark Spellcasters you currently control are unaffected by your opponent's card effects until the end of the turn. That is also huge, right? Like, no bullshit. That's a very good effect for just beating over things. So definitely something to consider. Yeah, I think this one's actually a slept-on card, and you should maybe consider building a deck around it, because just the 1,000 attack point increase is actually like pretty solid, right? Like, our decks that just like can't get over 3,500 attack, and Dark Magician would be a 3,500 attack vanilla monster that's unaffected by card effects if you have Eternal Soul in your hand, right? But it still could use some improvement, so let's fix it up a little bit. Let's dust it off a little bit, right? It doesn't need a complete fucking refurbish. It just needs some polishing, right? Dark Magic Expanded, the custom card. It's a continuous spell instead of a quick effect or a quick play spell, and it gains the following effects. This card gains effects based on the monsters you control. So instead of applying these effects in order, it's just if you control these monsters, these are the effects that are always active on the field, right? So Dark Magician, if you control a Dark Magician, your opponent cannot activate cards or effects in response to your monsters and spell and trap effects that list Dark Magician in their card text. So if this is on the field and you control Dark Magician, your opponent cannot respond to your Dark Magician monsters or Dark Magician spell and trap cards. Second, Dark Magician Girl. All spellcasters you control gain 1,000 attack points. Pretty simple stuff. Dark Magician Girl's basic effect is gain attack points. This just expands that effect, right? Palladium monsters. So this is if you basically control any Palladium monster, not any one specific Palladium monster. Spell and trap cards you control cannot be destroyed by your opponent's card effects, or cannot be destroyed by card effects in general, right? So I think this does a better job of kind of updating the effect for the modern state that the deck is in, right? Because we want to play the Palladium monsters, we want to play Dark Magician Girl, and we want to play Dark Magician, ideally, right? Because we want the draws off Soul Servant. So this further rewards you for playing those cards, and it actually gives you a reward for just having any of those one cards on the field. You get the following effects. And if you can manage to get a Palladium monster, a Dark Magician Girl, and Dark Magician on the field, you've got like a legitimate powerhouse. Like, this card's skill ceiling increases the more you understand the deck and the more Dark Magician focused monsters you play, right? So like, funny enough, out of all the cards that I've retrained or like remade, this one's probably my favorite. This one, I would love to see this effect get made, or like changed, and we get this kind of card in the game. I think it would be really, really fun to play, and I think it fixes a lot of the problems we have with the deck, like getting ashed, getting destroyed by Duster and shit like that. I don't know. Fun card, right? Fun remake. Let's move on. Okay. Still in the spirit of combo cards, we have Dark Burning Magic, another quick play spell. If you control monsters whose original names are Dark Magician and Dark Magician Girl, destroy all cards your opponent controls. Once again, this is slightly better than Dark Magic Expanded, but still slightly worse than Soul Servant and Magician Souls. Popping every card your opponent controls is crazy. Requiring Dark Magician and Dark Magician Girl on the field is also crazy. Hence why we tend to not play this card. However, you can play this with bonds, right? You can play this with bond between teacher and student, which I believe is our next card, right? Yeah. So, like, yeah, this one, I'd make an argument with you, doesn't even need to be fixed. It's fine. It's just the current game plan of the deck doesn't really reward you for playing this card. But I made it stronger anyway because I was bored and I thought it would be fun. So, Dark Burning Magic, it's still a quick play because that's what makes it a good card. And it says, if you control both Dark Magician and Dark Magician Girl, send all cards your opponent controls to the graveyard. It is Zeus, basically, right? Like, you have Dark Magician and Dark Magician Girl, bye-bye to your opponent's board. Fucking amazing. I would love the effect to work that way. I thought about including some... like, if you think send all cards your opponent control is too strong because it avoids destruction effects and shit like that, or it avoids destruction immune effects. If you think that's too strong, then I'd say keep the destroy all cards your opponent controls and just make it so that cards destroyed by this effect cannot activate their effects in the graveyard, right? That is how, those are the two ways that I'd recommend changing this card, is either send all cards your opponent controls to the graveyard, or destroy all cards and your opponent cannot activate cards and effects in response, or cannot activate the effects in the graveyard. But yeah, fun card. Like, even now, play bonds. Like, play the bonds package with Dark Burning Magic. It's a pretty good time, not gonna lie. You can have a decent amount of fun with those two cards. Speaking of bonds, let's look at it. Alright, bond between teacher and student. It's a normal spell card. If you control Dark Magician, special summon one Dark Magician Girl from your hand, deck, or graveyard. Then you can set one Dark Magic attack, Dark Burning attack, Dark Burning Magic, or Dark Magic Twin Burst directly from your deck. You can only activate one bond between teacher and student per turn. Again, this is it's just an okay card, right? It's pretty good. It's up there with Burning Magic, right? Because it gets you Burning Magic. You can legitimately build your whole deck around using this effect to trigger Dark Burning Magic to blow up your opponent's field turn 1, like, or turn 2, right? When they're doing their plays, you just say no, right? Or do it during the end phase. Just say no, because some decks just don't have right? They don't have negates. Like branded typically doesn't play a negate other than, what is it, branded retribution, but that only stops summon effects. This isn't a summon effect. Well, it is, but burning magic isn't a summon effect, so they can't stop this card. They do have gas, so they'll just, rebuild their field next turn, but it significantly weakens most boards. The only problem is that you can't activate dark burning magic the turn that you activate this effect, right? That's pretty ass. However, if you set dark burning attack or dark magic attack, you can activate those cards because they're just normal trap cards. So there's some debate on whether or not you should play either of those two cards instead of dark burning magic, but those cards are kind of bad. So moving on. Actually, I just realized that I didn't put dark burning attack. I didn't put dark burning attack on this list because it's a dark magician girl card. Honestly, the change I would make for that card is just send all send all monsters your opponent controls to the graveyard if you control Dark Magician Girl. Something like that is probably fine. Really, that card is okay, right? It's a fine card. It's just you need Dark Magician Girl, and the deck doesn't reward you enough for playing Dark Magician Girl, so we don't run that card, right? It doesn't do anything without Dark Magician Girl. Anyway, how do we fix bond between teacher and student, or how do we improve the effect? Because I don't necessarily think it's a bad effect. We've done the following. If you control Dark Magician or Dark Magician Girl, special summon one Dark Magician or Dark Magician Girl from your hand, deck, or graveyard. Then, if you control both Dark Magician and Dark Magician Girl, set one quick play spell card from your deck that mentions Dark Magician or Dark Magician Girl in its card text. You can only activate one bond between teacher and student per turn. So this is basically focused on adding Dark Burning Magic or Dark Magic Twin Burst. However, you can also you can also add Soul Servant because it's a quick play. You could add Inheritance. It's a quick play, right? You could add any of the Dark Magician quick play spell cards. So I think that it kind of both opens up some interactions that weren't there before and limits your interactions because you can't grab Dark Magic Attack or Dark Burning Magic. But also, you're not locked into just summoning Dark Magician Girl off this effect, right? You can summon Dark Magician, or you can use this to summon 2 Dark Magicians. You can use this to get 2 Dark Magician Girls on the field, right? You can use this if you have Dark Magician Girl and you need Dark Magician, right? It's like, I don't understand why bond between teacher and student only allows you to summon Dark Magician Girl while controlling Dark Magician. It just, like, that seems really restrictive for no reason. But yeah, other than that, I think it's fine. Generally, I think the original card is fine, so you're good. This just makes it a little bit better. And with that, we have come to the end of our little Spell and Trap card remake effects thing that I've done here from maintenance mode. Next time, in the next part, we'll be looking at the remaining monsters, specifically the monsters from the extra deck, but we have some stragglers here and there that are monsters that we haven't covered yet. Like, I don't think we haven't done Tamias, we haven't done Skilled Dark Magician, we haven't done Magi Karibo, which I love Magi Karibo. So they're Chronicle Magician, right? Like, there's still a few monsters we haven't covered. So next part is all dedicated to the monsters. Also, there are Dark Magician-esque or they're pseudo Dark Magician cards that I haven't covered because they don't specifically list Dark Magician in their card text, but I consider them to be honorary Dark Magician cards. This is stuff like Dark Magic Veil, Black Illusion, Dark Renewal, Dark Illusion, right? These are all cards that are like very specifically designed to be played in Dark Magician. They just don't list Dark Magician in their card text. So if you have more cards that are like that are basically Dark Magician cards, they just don't say Dark Magician, feel free to leave them in the comment section below, and I will cover those at some point. Probably not in the next part. Maybe they'll be in the next part, but probably not, because I want to make sure that I get all of them for like their own little video. And we're basically just going to make them honorary Dark Magician cards, right? But part 3 should probably be the last part in this series, because we'll have covered most of, if not all, Dark Magician cards. And if new support ever comes out that's absolutely dog shit, I'll be sure to make a quick video of me fixing those cards. So yeah, that's kind of it. Thank you very much for watching. You know, hey, if you've seen any of these videos, right, like this part or part 1, and you think you can do a better job of fixing any of the cards that I've listed, you know, in these videos, let me know in the comment section, right? Like, how would you fix a lot of these cards? I'm specifically interested in shit like Eye of Timaeus, Sage's Stone is one that's like really weird that could use some fixing. Dedication Through Light and Darkness, just because I really like reading that card's name. So if you have some recommendations for how you would fix that, and Dark Magician of Chaos, as well as Knight's Title and Dark Magician Knight, let me know, right? Like, I want to know what you guys have to say about all this stuff. So again, thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, you know, consider throwing me a like, you know, maybe a subscribe, maybe hit that bell, let you know when the next part comes out. Trying to do these once a week, and that's about it. I'll have the part 1 in the playlist for this entire thing linked down in the description below. So if you missed part 1 and you want to see what I had to say there, check out the description. All right, thank you all for what. Jesus Christ, an hour and 30 minutes. Actually, that's not as bad as I thought it was gonna be. Thought it was gonna be like 2 hours. Anyway, thank you for watching. I'm gonna head out. I'm gonna go get some sleep. I'll see you all on the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.